Greetings, fellow gardeners. It's mid-July. In fact, it's July 14, 2015. It's my birthday. Today, what I'd like to speak about is knives in the garden. I have noticed over the years that there are some unusual feelings about knives amongst people. I think a lot of us were raised as children that our folks said, "Get your hands off that, it's sharp. Don't touch that knife. Knives are dangerous." And this sort of thing, I think we were kind of raised with this caution about the knife. As for myself, as a young child, it was absolutely impossible for my mother to try to keep my hands off of sharp objects. She eventually gave up and assigned me to my own pocket knife at a rather young age, which I promptly stuck in my kneecap. Later I had other knives. I stuck them in my palm. I closed knives across the back of my hands, you name it. Did all sorts of things as a young person with knives. In the process, I learned a lot about them. They're sharp if you keep them sharp. And with knives, whether it's in the kitchen, in the workshop, in the garden, keeping them sharp is definitely a key issue. And so I'm going to cover that a little today. Recently, I was at a 4th of July barbecue. And there were hamburgers, and things are laid out with onions and tomatoes and this and that for everybody to build their own. And I got to the plate of tomatoes and I looked at it and I went, "What?" The cutting of the tomatoes was the worst I probably have ever seen. I mean, slices were irregular, nothing on one side, an inch on the other, and so on. They were really bad. And I'm looking at them and going, "Wow, this is really inept kitchen work. Somebody ought to take this person's pot holder away." And it wasn't until I got back home and I was slicing tomatoes myself that I realized why the tomatoes were cut as poorly as they were. And it was because their knives were not sharp. I came home and my knife was sharp and it was just like sushi falling off, perfect slices. And I realized just what had gone on. A lot of people own knives, and most of us will use them in the kitchen, but few of us really know how to sharpen one properly. That's a case. I run across more dull knives than I run across sharp ones out there. It also answers another question in my mind. That's when I'm out shopping in stores for produce, and I happen to see that, well, you'll have organic mushrooms, regular mushrooms, sliced mushrooms, and that people will be coming by grabbing sliced mushrooms. And I'm looking at the mushrooms and going, well, no, these right here, these are the freshest ones. They're perfect. They're closed nicely. Now, the sliced ones aren't going to last nearly as long. They begin to oxidize. They lose their quality and so on. Also, the problems with cross-contamination, which has happened like with cut lettuce and the salad green mixes, where we've got listeria and other bacteria into these mixes. That problem doesn't really occur when you've got a head of lettuce in front of you and you take a knife to it or you take your hands to it. And so it has always confused me. Why is it that people buy all this pre-sliced stuff? Now I know why. I think really it's because none of us have sharp knives. I can't live in the garden without my knife. I once ran a garden center here, a major one in the Bay Area, dating back to the 19th century, and found that my bosses also had an aversion to stocking knives in the store. I said, well, this is a garden store. You need to have grafting knives. You need to have basic garden knives. There's all kinds of knives that are used in this process. Oh, no, knives are bad. They didn't want them on the shelves. I finally did talk them into some grafting knives. We got some grafting knives, and I had to put them under lock and key. But there is this funny thing about knives that, of course, I don't quite understand. Being a guy who's had a knife in my head since I was a small boy, I understand its value. The knife is a basic tool all the way back to the beginning of human history. Probably close to one of our first tools. It was worth noting, beyond the stick, right? The knife was one of the early things that made us human, and it's still as valuable as it ever was. So I want to talk about a few of the knives that we might use in our garden. One of the most common knives, I have it right here in my pocket, is this little guy right here. This is a little folding pocket knife. It's lightweight. It has a thumb stud, so you can open it one-handed. I think that's pretty cool. It will take two hands to close it, like that. It has a little clip on the side, so if you want to put it on your pocket, like a pen. It'll do that. It doesn't hardly weigh anything at all because of its plastic case. It's got a stainless steel blade on it. It's nice and sharp because I've just sharpened it. It's really good for just general cutting twine, cutting plastic strapping. It's great for opening bags of potting soil and fertilizer and things like that. There's 1,001 uses for this knife, and actually my pockets are never without one of these. It's the reason I like the nice light ones like this, because you can carry them around, you never even know they're there. So just a basic folding pocket knife. I recommend the ones that have the locking blade, so they cannot close on you. The ones without the locking blade can be dangerous. When you go like this, they can fold up and they can hurt you. This is a pretty safe knife. It has a little catch on the back. You have to push down before you can close it. Another one of the basic knives used in the garden is the grafting knife. This right here is a Japanese grafting knife. Wonderful tool. Very, very sharp, surgical instrument. This knife is built the same way a samurai sword's made, by folding, beating, layering, folding the steel many times to give it the rigidity. And that's what we have here. This is a Japanese grafting knife. It's used for grafting fruit trees. Here's a good look at the knife. It's a pretty little thing. I'm always tempted to use this for other purposes other than my grafting, but I want to keep it nice and sharp and in perfect condition for this work. The thing about a good grafting knife in this particular style, it has only a single edge, so it's made like the chisel or the plane. The back side is flat. The bevel is on this side. We use it for work just like that. Here's a branch of apple that I grafted in last February. You can see the cut line right there, a long sloping diagonal cut. See the grafting sealer on both ends where I wrapped it with a rubber band and then sealed it shut, and it's growing nicely now. There's a very little scar. In a year or so you won't ever even see that this was done. Much lesser known amongst gardeners, but there is another very, very handy knife, and that's this guy right here. It's made in Portugal. This is a cabbage knife. It's used for cutting head vegetables. It's got a step in it like this, see, so that you can hold the handle right here and then push the blade in down and underneath to separate the cabbage from the stalk. It's good for cauliflower, it's good for harvesting cabbages, it's good for harvesting head lettuces, almost any kind of a round head vegetable where you can grab hold of the vegetable and shove this baby in and give it a turn side to side. This is an excellent knife for the purpose. It's sharpened on both edges, both here and here. Alright, here we have our cabbage. So to harvest this, I'm going to go ahead, push the leaves down around the cabbage a little bit like that. Take my knife, push the knife squarely into the stem under the cabbage, like that. Now I go left, right, off. Beautimous, huh? Now once we have the cabbage removed from the stalk, we can use the same knife by turning it sideways like this to remove extra leaves around the base. Like that, just tap them sideways, they come right off. There we go. And an absolutely perfect cabbage harvested with a cabbage knife. And finally, that brings me to my favorite garden knife, the machete. Now this is one that really seems to elicit terror in the minds of suburban gardeners when I pull this baby out. I guess it's because we see too many movies with like Latin American revolutionaries swinging machetes or something like this. And so it's got a bad attitude. Most urban gardeners in the mainland here seldom touch one of these. It's common in Hawaii. We see these a lot because tropical agriculture calls for knives like these. They're really, really, really handy. I think it's probably the best all-purpose knife I have in my garden. And then behind me I've got some corn. This is a great tool when you're working with corn. So I'm going to take off an ear here. I got an ear that's right there. Okay, so pull the ear off just by cracking her downward like that. Okay. And you can trim it with a machete if you like. Get the husk off a little bit. That's definitely doable. There you go. But the thing about the machete that I really like is when you got a corn stalk standing here and you want to get rid of it. And so it's like that, like that. We take a machete and go, the leaves come right off the side. Look at that. Is that pretty as you please? Huh? Whittle, 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 whittle. Cut it off right at ground level. Then I can take it and go like that. Cut this baby up into mulch. Don't need a compost shredder. This is really about the best darn tool that anybody ever thought of for cutting up stuff like tall grass and corn. And so I highly recommend that gardeners locate a quality machete. This one right here on the back of the blade, right there, says Ontario Knife Works, USA. This is a U.S. Army surplus machete. It's a really, really good machete as far as machetes are concerned. There are some that look exactly like this that are made in China, and they're really junk. Okay, so beware. Look for the ones that have the U.S. stamp on them, or look for machetes that are high quality. Some made down in Brazil. Some of the stuff made in South America is also really, really good stuff. Just I'd avoid the stuff you see made in China. Most of it's not sharpened or shaped properly. The handles don't fit right, blah, blah, blah. Steel quality is probably poor. Anyway, this is an excellent tool. You can just swing your way through the garden with one of these things. I used to do the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, hard beans, hard corn, and winter squash. And so I just let the thing grow together into this rambling mass of a jungle during the summer, and then I would do machete gardening, where I would cut my way into the patch, harvesting beans, corn, and pumpkins with the machete. Anyway, the final thing I'd like to talk about today is keeping your tools in good shape. Okay, and so right here I have a sharpener. This one happens to be made by Corona, the shear people. It was designed for use with pruning shears. It has a screwdriver on the end. It's got a wrench over here that'll fit mini nuts. If they'd made it just a little bit bigger, they'd have been able to use it for a beer bottle opener, which would have been perfect. I think this is out of production today because they left the beer bottle opener off. Anyway, it's got a diamond sharpening stone right here along the sides. There are so many different tools you can use for sharpening, all right? Electric sharpeners, stone sharpeners, and so on. But I like this one, and basically here I'm just taking it and laying it right along the edge of the blade. If you can see, look closely here. See, the machete is dark in color and has a little bit of rust on it, but yet you can see this sparkly silver edge in the sun there. That's what we're sharpening. That edge comes from both directions, from this side and that side, towards the middle. And so you lay the sharpening tool onto the edge and push it along the edge at the right angle, okay? And you can tell you got the right angle when it starts to polish up this nice silver bit along the side. You can also learn to feel it, because the stone will kind of bite into the side of that edge when it's really coming to the razor line there. And you can actually feel the pressure of that edge pushing against this stone as it's being sharpened. You do one side and the other, because if you do just one side, it'll kind of fold over as you're sharpening a little. Now, that right there is not quite sharp enough to shave with, but it's plenty sharp enough for cutting down corn stalks. And I highly recommend every time you pick up a knife and go out to work with it, sharpen the thing. Don't keep dull tools around. A dull knife doesn't work properly. It will waste your time. You will learn to hate knives if they're not sharp. Also, I have cut myself with dull tools, and it really hurts, and they don't heal well. I've cut myself with really sharp tools, and it's like a surgeon. It closes back up, heals perfectly. And so keep them sharp. That's very important. Alrighty, so this is all about knives in the garden. Bill's favorite tool. It's all about knives. Happy gardening.